camera's on, right?
It's your show, baby.
Now we get started here in just a minute. I think next time we'll have some music playing. It's a little too quiet. Did you turn on?
Yep, it's on.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I guess we get started. My name is Joel Miller with a podcast called Ohio Political News. So we're trying to get out and live stream as much as we can. We're live streaming tonight. Excited about tonight too, because we should have a good crowd, a decent amount of people that are watching it on live stream, and that's one way. Real quick, the reason we live stream is because I don't know how many people we have here, but if we don't live stream, this information just stays right here inside this group. We live stream, it gets out, we cut it up, we put it on 1 and 2 minute segments out on Facebook and stuff. The first one we did, I mean, we had some clips and stuff that were hitting 30 to 100,000 views and stuff. So this is the way to, this is the way to get it out. Also, we'll have a little bit of fun with this too. So don't feel too, don't intimidated or anything like that. If you got questions, we want to get those questions out. We want to really have a really good dialogue tonight. These guys here, we'll get started here. These guys here, wow, we got Chris Galloway. And if you want to say a short introduction about yourself, go ahead. Or unless you want to start with Brian, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I thought maybe we'd start with Brian. It's kind of his thing. Well, I want to thank Joe. Thanks for putting this together and broadcasting it. Brian, I want to thank you for the invitation to be here this evening. Again, my name is Chris Galloway. I am the Lake County Auditor, and I have been so since 2019. Additionally, I was previously a Concord Township trustee right here for 14 and a half-ish so years, And I also serve currently as the Vice President of the County Auditors Association of Ohio.
Thank you, Chris. My name is John Plechnik. I'm humbled to serve as one of your 3 Lake County Commissioners. I'm also a tax professor at Cleveland State, so you might guess that property tax issues mean a lot to me. I do want to extend my thanks to Joe Miller as well, our Republican State Central Committeeman and host for Ohio Political News. I want to correct you, that first event, we didn't just have 30,000 and 100,000 views on clips. We had one clip that went viral with over 1 million views. So maybe this will be a 1 million view night, folks, because we're going to be talking about some important stuff. But I sincerely want to thank you all for being here today. I see our Willoughby Hills Councilwoman, Julie Bellich, with us. I see Riverside School Board member with us here today, Belinda Grassi, and Concord Township Administrator Andy Rose, amongst many others. You being here helps to multiply the number of folks who understand the issues surrounding property taxes, which, however you feel and whatever side of the fence you fall on, property taxes are the #1 issue in Ohio today. We're going to debate them tonight.
All right, thank you, John. Great, appreciate it. My name is Leonard Gilbert, resident of Mentor, Ohio. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, but I've been here for about maybe 34 years. So I do still have a southern drawl, but I like it. And I got on this property tax issue, it's been at least 15 years. I wrote my first editorial about 10 years ago, and I saw this coming down the path, and everybody said, oh, you'll never do what's going to happen. They say you're going to teach people this is fine, it's going to work out, but I said, if you keep doing this, people are going to start losing their homes. Every day now, as I sit behind the computer, I'm getting phone call after phone call after phone call about, Leonard, we're losing our homes. And that to me is just totally ridiculous. In a, what we call the United States, the state of freedom and liberty, I don't think it exists anymore. And so we're trying to change that. I'm not doing it for my generation, I'm doing it for the next, because what we're doing cannot be sustained, and you're going to destroy a lot of lives in the process if you don't act sooner than later. All right.
Thank you, Leonard. My name is Brian Massey. I'm here in Concord Township, just the average citizen, nothing more. I'm not running for public office. I'm not trying to just give back to the community. That's it. I have a website called Lobbyists for Citizens, and we've been doing that for over 5 years now. I've been interested in the property taxes for over 10 years. And it started recently enough just looking at my own property tax bill. Why we're here tonight, though, Leonard and I started this. We knew something was happening. And we said, we've got to get with our representatives. We've got to get with Callender and Troy and Serino. And we got to look for some help. Because we knew that this was going to be just a flaming disaster for a lot of people. They would not meet with us. We went down to the State House, spoke before Representative Romer's committee to review and reform property. And what I found is when I started talking about the Willoughby East Lake School getting over $8 million without a vote of the people, they censored my speech. We tried and tried. The only representative that would meet with us was Brian Stewart. He's down in somewhere around the Columbus Market. And when we told him what we wanted to do, he said, that's too big of a lift, and he's not going to be able to help us. If we had something smaller, maybe we could help. We tried to start the movement.
Let me give you this mic here. But don't touch this part.
All right, is this better? All right. Operator error. You know, we started the movement, we call it SOS, Save Our Seniors. We wanted the legislators to stop property taxes for seniors when they hit 65 years of age. And we were told categorically there will be no carve-outs for seniors. So when they wouldn't talk to us, and then when they would not go along with our carve-out for seniors, Leonard and I basically said, we've got to start the beast. They're not listening to us. So we formed a committee, 5 people. We found, luckily, a young lady in Kerman, Vesna Midget Barisic. She was an attorney, raised her hand and helped us write the amendment that we got approved by the Attorney General and by the Secretary of State Ballot Board. When we got that approved, then we knew that we were on the path to collect the signatures. We found out that we needed 413,488 valid signatures in the hands of the Secretary of State's office by July 1st. Our goal is to get 620,000 signatures. The number one question I get, well, Brian, how many signatures do we have? And my response is this. I'm not going to tell you any comforting lies. I'm going to tell you the unpleasant truths. There are going to be some politicians that are not real happy with me. Jerry Serino went before the Willoughby Eastlake. There was a meeting by the commissioners at the Willoughby Townhall, and he said that he's not supporting this amendment, and he said he won't vote for it if it's on the ballot. He recommended all of the politicians in Lake County not sign the petition. He also said, tell 100 people that you know not to sign the petition. I've got that on video that I'll show you. I've got it. I was there recording it. Jerry Serino declared war on we the people. So we're telling all our politicians, especially the state legislators, that's where the problem is. We're declaring war on the state legislators. When you declare war, when you're at war, you never give the enemy any intel. So I'm not telling anybody. Leonard doesn't even know how many signatures we have. We're trying to get it on the November 2026 ballot. But to the legislators, even if we don't get enough signatures for that ballot, we're going to go for May 2027. We're not stopping. Any tax causing a citizen to become homeless is immoral. Joe, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you. How about a little applause here? Let's make a little noise. Great, thank you. All right. What I want to do is we're going to start with a couple of questions. I have a couple of questions I'm going to ask you guys, and then I'll see who has questions here in the audience, and we'll just go from there. Okay? This is for you, and this is we learn a lot from every session that we do. All right. I want to start it off though because this is the most important question. Everybody asks this question all the time. So let's have a little dialogue here. Okay? How do we pay for everything, guys, if we abolish the property taxes?
Okay, folks, we're going to start with a simple answer because it's the best. How do you pay for abolishing, for cutting, for reducing property taxes? 2 words. Cut spending. That's it. 2 words. Cut spending. I mean, fundamentally, we have 3 choices. We can do nothing and allow property taxes to go up and up and up, tax seniors out of their homes, and ultimately tax us all out of Ohio. And we know that's happening because Ohio is shrinking relative to our sister states. Every census, we lose another 1 or 2 congressional seats. And we know why. This is a trend that's been going on not for years, but for decades. High-tax states like New York, California, and sadly, yes, Ohio, are losing out to states. People are moving to states that are low-taxed, like Florida, Texas, and Tennessee. They're booming. And we don't have to ask. We know why. It's because people vote with their feet. They get frustrated when the politicians don't listen, and they vote with their feet and leave. And sadly, that is the path that Ohio has been on for decades now. We should be the #1 state in the nation. We should be growing. Cleveland should be the center of industry, technology, and innovation. There was a time when Cleveland was a top 5 city in the United States. What changed? A bunch of politicians started raising tax after tax after tax, and people left. Now, that's door #1, and I don't much want to walk through it any further, because we know it's a long, slow death for the state of Ohio and all of our communities. Door #2, and this is one you hear from a lot of the politicians in Columbus, well, we're going to have to get rid of police and roads, and there'll be no more firefighters or EMTs. You'll call 911, and it'll be Mad Max. You know, okay, that sounds interesting, not very appealing. I don't know about you, but I want police. I want fire. I want good roads, and I'm not willing to do without. So door #2, I think, is fear-mongering. It's a straw man argument. If you abolish property taxes, no roads, police, or fire, I call BS. Because there's door #3. We have a third option. And that third option is we cut spending. Specifically, we cut the state budget and we bring public schools back to basics. Did you know that the state budget today is over $100 billion? The biggest state budget in Ohio history. All property taxes bring in, depending on who you ask, they range from 20 to 24 billion as the estimate. So if we cut the state budget by about 20%, boom, property taxes paid for. And that's not even considering the proposals that leaders like Chris Galloway have made of, well, what if we consolidate school districts, we eliminate administration. We don't just save money doing that, we save kids, because our public schools are failing children today. Anyone who the children would say, we've hired all these administrators who've gotten in between teachers and parents on the one hand, students and kids on the other, and scores have gone down. If we really cared about our children, we would do emergency surgery today in our public schools, and yeah, that'll save money, but more importantly, it'll save our children's future. So I don't know about you, but if my choices are, I'm taxed out of my home, I live in a post-apocalyptic wasteland with no roads, police, or fire, or we cut spending, I'm going for door #3. Amen?
That's probably the #1 question I get. How are we going to replace the money for the property taxes? What I hear down from the candidates for governor, they said, we are going to eliminate the income tax. The income tax generates $10.7 billion a year for the state. Not one person has ever asked the question, well, how are we going to replace $10.7 billion if you don't have an income tax? One of the big problems that I see when I've looked at the numbers, there's something called the local government funds. Money is taken in by the state from a variety of sources. The state gives a percentage of that back to the local communities. What has happened over the years, and if I had a computer, I'd be able to show you the charts, that the local government funds, the amount of money that all of the municipalities use to pay for many of the services have been cut drastically by the state. If they eliminate the income tax, they may wipe out that local government funds altogether. So my question is, why do they want to eliminate the income tax? Why don't they want to do something about the property tax? Could it be that their donor base is saying, I don't want to pay these income taxes? Ladies and gentlemen, no one really cares about you down at the State House. They don't. It's their donor base. We've become socialists down at the State House. I've got a video
of Representative Dan Troy saying that school funding is the purest form of socialism, the redistribution of wealth. I've got a video that Ron Young, his last day in office as a commissioner, he said the two top priorities of government is to grow and protect itself. That's when I came up with the statement that the public sector has outgrown the private sector's ability to pay for the services. So when Commissioner Plechnik says cut spending, he means cut spending. They don't know what that is. I've done a lot of records requests here in Lake County, all the taxing authorities. And the amount of cash that is accumulated, not by all of them, but many of them. Deepwood with $65 million, Lake Metro Parks with $30 million, the Crime Lab with $10 million. I asked the question, do we need a crime lab? Not every county has their own crime lab. The crime lab's accumulating $1.6 million more a year than they need to operate. When I asked, well, why did you ask for so many mills? And he said, well, we don't have to go back to the taxpayers for 15 years. That's not being good stewards of the taxpayer money. When we talk about police and fire, of course we're going to pay for police and fire. We're not anarchists. But what does the value of my home have to do with how much I'm paying for the police? It doesn't correlate to me. And I say to my friend Andy Rose here, as our great Concord administrator, I say, Andy, just send me a bill. I'll pay for it. Right now, I get a property tax bill. It's got a lump sum. I'm paying $2,100 to Concord Township. I want to know how much I'm paying for police, for fire, for roads, bridges. Why? Transparency. I believe that honesty, integrity, and transparency are keys to good governance. If I'm paying $1,000 for my police protection, and my neighbor is only in the next community over is only paying $100, I'm going to ask why. Maybe there's some valid reasons. But we haven't been curious enough as people. We just assume that what we're paying, we're always going to pay it. We're merely just renters from the government. And the other thing that it's very important that you know is the role of government. Should the role of government be in the business of valuing properties? I don't view it as that is the role of government at all. Lake County paid $1.8 million to a third-party appraiser to appraise the properties for the latest sexennial revaluation. We were trying to get, and we asked questions, why was this house valued at this amount? We were given this statement, well, we really can't tell you because it's all proprietary information. So I said, well, wait a minute, I don't understand this. We're paying public money to a third party that's controlling my destiny, but he's not accountable to me. That sounds exactly what when this country was formed with the Boston Tea Party. If you don't have property valuation, I question whether or not we need treasurers and auditors in every county. How many dollars are being spent at the state for this whole property valuation? It's too complicated. Many of the legislators are voting on this. They don't understand it. The last 4 levies that are resolutions that were passed, laws passed, and started with Representative Dave Thomas, and then DeWine passed it. People ask me, well, Brian, isn't that good enough? I said, no. It's too little, too late. I am tired of being a renter from the government. Private property is the foundation of freedom and liberty. This is more than a dollar and cent issue, ladies and gentlemen. All of our legislators swear an oath. And in that oath is to support and defend the Ohio Constitution. Take a look at the first article of the Ohio Constitution. It talks about private property. It is their sworn duty to represent us as citizens so that they can help us protect our private property. And we are going to make sure that they understand that.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to make mine short and sweet because it baffles me. It blows my mind when someone asks me how we're going to pay for police, fire, and emergency. Now, if I show you a chart and I'm showing you that we're on a trajectory that we can't sustain, why would that question make sense? So I don't want a one-to-one correspondence. What I want is the number to come down because of what we're doing. If we can't sustain what we're doing, it makes no sense. Grandmama taught me the very simple economics lesson. First thing, she said, Leonard, the thing about men and women, they have to be restrained. Because if you don't, we'll spin ourselves into oblivion. The other thing is, she said, if you're digging a hole and you don't want it to get any deeper, just put the shovel down. Basic concept somehow just eludes us because we've complicated things so much. We don't even know why we're paying the property tax. And most of the time, people look at their bill. They don't know where that money's going. They don't know what levies are tied to it. But yet, we're continuing to pay for our own demise. Now, when you get right down to it, it's this. And I told Brian when I always vet a candidate, I always ask the basic question, how do you differentiate between right and wrong? I get blank stares. This is not complicated. I ask the question, what is the role of government? Blank stares. Now, if we can't even answer those fundamental questions, and you're using in my house for a bargaining chip to support what you're doing, there is something wrong here. We shouldn't even be discussing this. There's something totally out of whack. But again, what I told Brian, the abnormal has become normal. And here's the thing I can tell you about it from a biblical perspective. What we're doing cannot be justified biblically. And what do I know about biblical interpretations? I do know this. If you continue to break God's law, there's going to be consequences. And the reason why I know that, because my grandmother used to always tell me, son, pull your pants down because there's consequences for sin. For some reason, when we get the government, we think they can't happen. But trust me, you can have hell unleashed right here on earth, and I'm witnessing it every day by people calling me, telling me what's going on in their lives, and they're losing their homes. And that's happening right here in this country, and it's going to continue if we don't put the brakes on and stop the nonsense.
Joe, it's a great question because it gets at the heart of the initiative that Brian and Leonard have started and the great debate that's going on across the state, which is if you're going to replace a type of taxation, there's really only a couple of ways to do that. You either have to, as Commissioner Pleshnik has said, cut and then cut again, or you're going to have to find other revenue streams in which to replace it with, or some combination thereof. And that is really the challenge before Ohioans. Make no mistake, 50 states have property tax. There's not one state that doesn't. Why do all the states have property tax? Well, from a historical standpoint, when we were an agrarian-based country and you had small communities around the country, it was the only way to pay for some level of local government services, right? Some basic services. We're here in a township, and that's the most basic form of government that you can have in the state of Ohio. But somewhere along the way, the township trustees, one of the things that they are required to do, as an example, is maintain the roads. And so at some point, the residents of Concord Township decided we want our roads better maintained. We don't want dirt roads anymore. And somewhere along the way, somebody said, well, the only way we can do that is we have to all agree to levy a tax on ourselves so that we can start paving some roads and maintaining them. This road that you came in on out here, Auburn Road, in the 1800s, and the portion of it in Concord was called Mud Road. Do I need to tell you why it was called Mud Road? Right? So that's the history within a more simple society, and how folks at the local level decided to levy charges against themselves, farmers saying, tax my property, tax my home, and that I will pay that, and that will go to the road supervisor to make sure that that's, taken care of. Flash forward 120 years, the taxation system in Ohio has gotten so complex that most of what gets done at the local level, police, fire, roads, EMS, recreation centers, this building you're sitting in, that was the tool that was used in order to pay for all of it. And the citizens went out and they would vote yes or no, one way or another, on the levies when they were put before them to decide whether or not that's something that they wanted to do, and it was a service that they wanted. Now flash forward again. The state of Ohio, in the last 35 to 40 years, 40 years ago, 60% of your property taxes were paid by businesses. 40% were paid by residents. And today, that's good. Now it's residents paying 60% and businesses paying 40%. Now that's a generalization, right? Community by community can be different. A city like Mentor has a large commercial and industrial base. It's not a coincidence that they have the lowest property taxes in Lake County, because they have a large business sector picking up an outsized portion. When you go to a city like Willowick, it's not surprising that they have the highest property taxes in the county, because it's heavily residential. They don't have anything to offset that, so they're out of balance. And so it is different community by community. And the challenge that, and these are conversations that I had with Leonard and Brian the first time they came to see me when they were starting this initiative, and they wanted to, get my opinion on things. And I told them right out of the jump, the biggest challenge that you will ultimately have in convincing people to vote to abolish property taxes will be what comes next. Because it's a natural question that folks will want to know, well, if I'm going to no longer have a property tax bill, how is my fire getting paid? How is my road getting plowed? How is, when my husband's having a heart attack, someone's going to show up? And those are legitimate questions. And what that really leaves us with is determining first, as Ohioans, what are our priorities? When we talk about cutting, what do we want to cut? What don't we want? Because property taxes in the state of Ohio, when I served on the governor's property tax work group last fall, the Department of Taxation told us that property taxes annually represent $23.2 billion annually to local government. And keep in mind, that's local government, including the schools. And so that's not money that goes to Columbus. I was at a forum somewhere recently, and somebody said, well, I'm sick of Columbus, and I want them to stop taking my money, so I'm going I want to vote to get rid of property taxes. And I said to that gentleman, I said, no, that's not how that works. So I think there needs to be a real discussion in the weeds. This is the hard part. That if we're going to replace $23.2 billion, where's it coming from? My concerns are that Columbus, and I agree with Brian on this front, Columbus doesn't really care, all right? I give Brian and Leonard and their team credit. I can tell you that property tax reform initiatives that the county auditors have been pushing for 3 years never really went anywhere with the legislature until they started. That they were the outside catalyst that pushed the legislature to pass the reforms that they just passed in this fall and the governor signed. Yeah, you can clap for that, 100%. We wouldn't have gotten those done if they hadn't started this initiative. And more needs to be done. And we have to have that conversation about priorities and cuts. And then we have to have the conversation about what's going to go up. The legislature has said their goal, especially the state senate and folks like Vivek Ramaswamy have said we want to bring Ohio to a 0% income tax state. We want to compete with Florida and Texas and Tennessee and New Hampshire and all these other states. And that's a fine goal, although I will tell you flat out, I travel around the state a lot talking about this, media and other forums. I have not anybody come to me and say, we really got to get rid of income tax. I have not had anybody, but you're all here because property tax. That's your concern. And what we have seen over the last 40 years in that shift in Ohio, from commercial to residential, shifting that burden, especially recently, has come at the same time that the real estate market has gone crazy, right? For most of that time, most of us were getting our valuations and our property tax bill and every 3 years, property values would go up 6-7%, and your tax bill would go up 2%, and nobody was concerned about it. But then we got into this crazy housing market, and property values skyrocketed nationally, 50% in 5 years, and subsequently valuations and subsequently tax bills. And the Ohio property tax system broke. The formula broke. And it allowed this surge of taxes and therefore created, rightfully so, the anger. And I will tell you, I agree with Brian and Leonard in terms of this is not sustainable. And the only way that we are going to get to a place of being able to have, proper tax reform is we're going to have to reform government at all levels. Because at the end of the day, it's choosing the services you want, but then it's also recognizing that in government, even in the private sector, 70% of a budget is labor. Our city councilwoman knows it. Our school board members know it. Andy Rose knows it. It's 70% labor. And so if we don't figure out the way to deliver services more efficiently and reduce those costs, we can't get out of the jackpot, right? So we go to property taxes is 0, great. Our income taxes are at 10% and sales taxes at 10 cents on the dollar. What have we gotten? So we've got to figure out a way to hack away at that $24 billion. And the only way to do it is to reform government and things like the school funding formula, and to figure out how to my goal is to get school funding off your property tax bill and have Columbus properly
All right,
pay
there
for
you
it.
go. Hey, let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about, and then we're going to take it out to the audience here and get some of their questions and stuff. All right, question with the schools. I live in Cleveland Heights. 77% of my property, my outrageous high property taxes go to the schools. 77%. I have an idea. I'll throw this out at you guys. Let the state take care of the school portion through sales tax. They should be funding the schools anyhow. Either that or give everybody a $10,000 voucher, go to public school, go to private, do whatever you want. The problem I have, guys, my kids never went to Cleveland Heights because I, honest to God, wouldn't put them into that public school. It's horrible. So I never utilized it. You know, there's taken a huge portion of my property tax every single year as long as I'm alive. And then if I die, the next person who takes over. So this whole system is not, I think as we've said, it's, what is it? Well, it's not sustainable, and it's just kind of evil in a way. Okay, so it's got to be, listen, the idea here is, and this is what I want to get with some of the people out here, the idea is we got to change something, all right? The way it is now cannot continue. So let's talk about what changes we can make right now, okay? So let's hear something. And then I want to get to the audience.
All right, I'll be quicker. All right, I'm the guy that went and first proposed that we move to 94 school districts. And I did that as part of the governor's property tax reform work group because I wanted to start a conversation around the state to get people to start talking about education funding reform. And the idea behind 94 districts is one school district per county plus carving out the 6 large cities like Dayton, Cleveland. It's not fair to say the Montgomery County to have, Dayton schools overwhelm the rest of those school districts. But the savings that could come from eliminating administrative redundancy, aligning schools, aligning curriculum, you're looking at least $2 to $5 billion annually across the state, okay? Ohio has approximately 7 or 611, depending on how you count, school districts. In 1915, we had 2,500. Today, we have 611. So I'm here to tell you, you can reduce the number of school districts. We've done it over our history. Florida is twice the population of Ohio, and they have 73 districts. Right? So we can do it with 94. That's one. Two, to Joe's point, and by the way, Joe, I didn't know you lived in the People's Republic of Cleveland Heights, a nuclear-free zone. Boy, no wonder you're angry about taxes.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Secondly,
if you put a MAGA sign out front in your yard, your house will be totally demolished.
Well,
okay?
yeah, that would be considered a hate crime there.
Right.
All right, I digress. You have to have fundamental reform, right? And I've had people say to me, Chris, but we have local control of schools. No, you don't. You have no local control of schools. That's a farce. A school board member will tell you that 95% of the things they vote on are required, right? They have to do it. The state mandates it. And so, and I know what Commissioner Pleshnik, which is, the state sends down tons of unfunded mandates to our school districts, requires them to do X, Y, and Z, this testing, that testing, these reports. So when we wonder why a school district goes and hires 4, 5, 6, 7 more administrators, they're not just doing that because they're like, we're bored, let's hire some administrators. They're doing it because the state of Ohio forces down tons and tons of unfunded mandates onto them that they have to manage. So that becomes problem number one. So Ohio has decided that those unfunded mandates, who pays for it? You, through your property taxes. When the school board has to come to you and say, please be willing to raise your taxes to pay for all this stuff that the state is making us do. So if the state is going to do that, then it's high time they pay for it. All right? And you want to watch the fastest way to get the state to stop doing stupid stuff in terms of mandates is when they have to pay for it. And so that's number one. Get school funding off your property tax bill. Do we think Joe is still mad about property taxes if he gets a 77% property tax cut? No. Is anybody in here mad if you have your local school districts that's getting 60%, 62% of your school? Are you still angry? Are you angry at your fire levy? No. So that is the biggest thing that I think that needs to be focused on and needs to be pushed to Columbus to fix the school funding formula so that and to have the reforms and the consolidation and the things that make sense in a modern world so that we can move Ohio forward, get it off of your backs, and we can do so through some increased sales tax, maybe a little income tax, maybe things like some additional sin tax, so when somebody like me goes and buys a $100 bottle of bourbon, then I'm going to pay a little extra, right? And I accept that, right? And that's perfectly fine. Those are the things that we need to push Columbus to do. And if we get school funding off our backs locally, and they're funding it, and they're paying it, and it's their system because we don't have local control, then that will solve a huge part of the crisis in terms of the threat of people losing their homes, the challenge that people have paying those bills, and it will really deflate the problem. And I think it's very attainable, but it's going to take all of you to push the legislature to do that.
I hate to say it, but I think the only way we're going to push the legislature to do their constitutional duty under Article 6, Section 2 of the Ohio Constitution to fully fund the common schools, the public schools, is to take the property taxes away. If there was any appetite on the part of Columbus to actually do their job, they'd be doing it now. Do they know that they're required to do it? Yes. Has the Ohio Supreme Court told them that they're required to do it in DeRolf? Also yes. Are they doing it? No. So I'm not sure that going to our state reps and senators and pointing out for the 182nd time that the Constitution the Constitution that you swear to literally requires you to do this, we don't really have an appetite for that. Because you know what? They don't want to give up the extra billions of dollars that they hand out like a slush fund every year in tax abatements, in special benefits to corporations, $600 million to the Browns, billions of dollars in tax benefits to data centers, and it just so happens that Jimmy Haslam writes max-out checks to all of them. I'm not saying that they're trading their votes for campaign contributions, but sometimes you wonder, right? And so I'm not here to say that we shouldn't tell them. The Constitution says you're required to pay for public schools. Get off my home. But we've told them that loud, proud, and clear, and they have done nothing. So I think that sword of Damocles that we have put over their heads, the petition to abolish property taxes, is the only reason they've done anything and the only reason they'll do anything more, which is why before you leave today, I hope every person in this room does the right thing for our children's future. If you care about our children, sign the petition because they won't have a future if you don't. But I want to give a little bit of history lesson because our auditor said, well, we'll pay for things with a little bit of sales tax, a little bit of income tax, some other fees. Well, let's talk about that. 1923, Ohio adopts the state sales tax for 3 reasons. Number 1, the local government fund. Number 2, funding public schools. Number 3, alleviating poverty. All local expenditures. Well, the state decided to keep all the money. 5.75%, the vast majority of the sales tax that we pay here in Lake County goes right down to Columbus instead of staying here with the people who pay it. That's outrageous. But then they passed the income tax decades later, and they said, now we mean it for real. This time we mean it. That'll fund local government. That'll fund public schools. But they ended up keeping most, if not all, of the money, depending on the math you do. And John Kasich accelerated that trend by slashing the local government fund. Every school board member, every city council member and township trustee remembers that. So they kept that too. Well, then they passed the lottery and they said this will fund public schools. Do I really need to tell you how the story ends? We keep passing more and more and more taxes and fees, and the folks in Columbus keep the money. I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay some sales and income tax. Quite the contrary. We already are. We already pay more than enough. So let's use the taxes we already pay to fund our public schools, to fund our local governments. Instead of sending the money to Columbus, 100% of that sales tax, 100% of the income tax should stay with us. And the governor and the state legislature can meet once every 2 years in volunteer positions. They do a lot of damage with all the crazy laws they pass, the unfunded mandates, the ridiculous taxes they come up with every other year. I would much rather only have to worry about them once every 2 years. First, do no harm. that have to worry about them 24/7, 365 with emergency sessions and crazy new laws all the time. Let's cut Columbus to the bone, keep all the money locally, and pay not a dime more. That's how you abolish property taxes.
There you go. All right. All right, listen, I'm going to get some people involved here, and what we will do is, I'm sure people have questions, right? Got a question? Raise your hand. What we will do is, like, just one person answer the question, okay? And unless somebody else thinks that they need to chime in on it. But also, when I said that the sales tax needs to fund the schools, I wasn't talking about increasing the sales tax either. There's plenty of money there, and we know about all the Medicaid fraud that's going on, the billions of dollars that is being wasted through that. So they will find the money, guys. Don't worry about it. There's plenty of money. They'll actually have to work a little bit. All right, who's got a question? You got a quick? Yeah, I'll hold it.
Politicians have an oath of office. We volunteers need an oath of office. That oath is, we volunteers will not let them kick us out of our homes and our neighbors out of their homes. That's our oath.
There you go. There you go. All right, who's got another question? And it has to be a good question, or we're going to kick you out. I'm sorry, but we have tough standards. Go ahead.
So I have two questions, actually. First of all, you've made an indication that we should cut, and you've made an indication that we should consolidate. I will not disagree with you that we should consolidate some government services. I am 100% in favor of that, and I've said it many times myself. However, who is going to make that decision, and how are they going to make that decision? If you're going to say, we're going to consolidate schools, I'll just take schools because I'm a school board member. So if we're going to consolidate schools and we have 611 school districts in the state of Ohio, who is going to come up with that plan, and we're just going to willingly consolidate our schools? We talked about that when I worked out in Geauga County. It didn't work. There was too much infighting. There is nobody that's going to voluntarily consolidate themselves and cut themselves. How is that going to happen, and how do you think that's going to happen in 6 months?
Go ahead, Brian.
So what do we need state legislators for if they can't address that? Maybe we need some new legislators that can think outside the box.
The job of the state legislators, that's who it is. Job of the state reps and all that.
I mean, you've heard one plan here tonight. Our auditor, Chris Galloway, has proposed essentially a one-county, one-school district model with some exemptions for bigger counties. I think that's too generous, by the way. I think 88 school districts would be too many for Ohio. But I want to be clear about what we're talking about. The reason why there's controversy and people infight over the idea of consolidating school districts is they don't understand what it means. No one is saying that the Kirtland football team no longer represents Kirtland, or there's no longer the Wycliffe Blue Devils. You know how much it costs to write Wycliffe or Kirtland or Riverside on a diploma? $0. It doesn't cost any more to let everyone keep their team. Well, you need to have multiple teams for that many kids. And by the way, there are plenty of school districts that have more than one team. See Willoughby Eastlake, North High School, South High School. They've been rivals forever. You can keep your sports team. You can keep the name on the diploma, but you know what you have? One superintendent for a county, one curricular director, one chief financial officer, not 9. That is crazy. And what else you get is you have one school board. So frankly, we can actually afford to pay our school board members enough that we get the best and brightest people to step up to do those jobs. I'm saddened by how many times we don't even have enough people running for school board to fill the seats. We need to have fewer school board members over a bigger district so we get the absolute best people competing and fighting for those positions. So consolidation isn't a scary thing. We lose nothing. We gain everything.
Yeah, Belinda, I'm a realist, and I can tell you that there is no way local school districts will decide to do it on their own. It would take an act of the legislature. The legislature would have to force it. They would have to, for once in their life, have a spine and be willing to say, we're doing this. I don't know that it'll happen, but here's what I would say. It's not going to happen in the next 6 months. What I would say is that if the state of Ohio has to take over full funding of education, their motivation on the construct of school districts and administration will change dramatically when they're paying the bill. So what I would just say is so I recognize that it would take the state forcing it. There would have to be a transition period to obviously consolidation. You dealt with it. You saw it in Geauga when you worked down there, and those districts were trying to consolidate, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes on. So the realistic element is that we have school districts like you go out to Northwest Ohio. You have a county of 29,000 people. Okay, they have 4 school districts. So that's not 29,000 students. That's 29,000 people. Concord you're sitting in right now has 20,000 people. And they have 4 school districts. It's inefficient. So, go ahead.
So my question then comes to school funding. So quite frankly, if we wanted to fully fund schools, the state of Ohio could do that right now. Mm-hmm. They have every ability to do that, but they keep sending money to vouchers. And if the voucher students get $8,000 per student and my school district only gets $2,000 per student, you tell me how that is fair, and that is what they continue to do. So let's tackle that issue. They have every ability to do that right now without having to raise any dollars, without having to raise any sales taxes, without having to raise any other additional taxes. The state of Ohio has been collecting over their estimated budget for the past 12 months, if not more, every single month.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm not here to defend any particular funding mechanism. I'm here to, I recognize that it's broken. And the state of Ohio, to Joe's point, to Brian's point, has a substantial amount of revenue. This comes back to the thing that I said in my opening remarks. This is about priorities. What are our priorities and what do we want funded? There's a lot of money there that, they'll have to make hard choices. And so is there possible that you would need some other revenue streams? Of course it might be, because there are always, of course, tons of obligations. I mean, right now, the state of Ohio's state budget, 51% of it goes to education. 51%. So it's not like they're not spending money on education, and that's all forms. Like that's public, what they give to our local schools, that's vouchers, that's colleges, it's vocational. 51% of the state budget is education. 65% of your tax bill is education. I mean, we're spending enough money on education in the state of Ohio. So to your point, Belinda, the money's there.
Okay, we got a question back here. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Judge David Engler, and I know most of you up there. And I want to say this first because I'm currently a judge and seeking to become a judge of the Court of Appeals. So if there's any case that comes before me, I will decide it fairly based upon the Constitution and the laws. That being said, I've been an insider for the last 45 years, a city councilman, a county commissioner for 8 years, a county school board member for 22 years, and now a judge. There are certain diseases that can only be cured by cutting off the hormone or supply that creates that disease. Like a cancer, you have to turn off the estrogen in order to get to the cancer. The only way, in my humble opinion, that you're going to be able to make significant change is by cutting off the money that goes to Columbus. They're never going to make a decision to consolidate school districts. They're never going to make the correct decisions about cutting spending. They only will know it when the money is turned off at the source. That's the only response that makes any sense to actually make some lasting change in our entire state.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Questions. You got a question? I get some exercise doing this. Go ahead.
We got exercise too. So, for instance, with the schools, we live in the Wickliffe City School District. Wickliffe spends over $24,000 per student. We are a community of roughly 14,000 people. And yet their scores, proficiency scores, are over 55 percentile. Now, then the school board screams, we just lost $570,000 in revenue due to the more in the owner occupancy credit and the homestead exemption. So the school boards take their orders, and this is how I see it, and others do too, from your teachers union. Enough is enough. If you cannot survive off of what you're making, the school gets Title I money from the state. I'm tired of hearing from the school board members. It's vouchers. The state keeps giving more in vouchers and into Ed Choice. Ed Choice is open, and it goes according to the family's income. Whatever that income is, then that family has to make up the difference. I believe in parental choice. But when you have such a small school district as Wickliffe, and we got stuck with a $60 million bond levy for over 30 years for what we call the prison on the hill, which is, it's terrible. And to do this, and yet they want more money, and they're going to come back now for a 1% earned income tax on us and not hitting our property taxes. So, Mr. Galloway, the homestead exemption and the owner occupancy credit is only good for 1 year. Are you going to reconsider to do it again for the following year? But I do believe the schools need to stop with asking more money. They need to budget what they have. We have 6 principals in Wickliffe. 6 principals in one big school, pre-K through 12. 1,200 students.
So let's address this head on. Let's address this head on, because you've raised a lot of very important points. First and foremost, it's clear to me that the vast majority of school districts and government has not gotten the message from we the people. We are not asking you to find new and creative ways to tax us more. We are telling you to cut spending and tax less. We are not interested in how you can afford to balance your budget. We care about how we balance our budget on the kitchen table. We are paying you too much, and we're looking to cut spending and cut taxes, which means we pay less than when we started. So the idea that we're going to replace property taxes with earned income taxes, with sales taxes or anything else, is just government hallucinating like a bad AI. No one is asking to be taxed in new and different ways. We are saying cut spending. That's number one. Number two, a lot of local governments, particularly school boards, put out misinformation about the doubling of the homestead exemption and the doubling of the piggyback. This is one thing the state legislature did right. In House Bill 96, the state budget, they gave every county in Ohio the authority to 2.5% or 5% rollback for any homeowner. Those are seniors with a home household are making $40,000 or less. These are people who really need some help. These are not rich folks. These are folks who need help. So we're talking about homeowners who just saw their property taxes explode and low-income seniors who are literally being taxed out of their homes. We were given the ability to double those modest benefits as county commissioners. Now, here's the catch. Whereas the baseline, the original homestead exemption, and owner occupancy credit are reimbursed by the state so that local governments still get the same amount of money even though those exemptions are in place, they didn't reimburse for these two. Now, I think the state has too much money as it is. They should have reimbursed, but here's the bottom line. Even though it did mean that by doubling these credits and exemptions for all of you, it cut property taxes a little bit for everyone else, you would swear that the commissioners, who I'm proud, I voted unanimously with Commissioners Beveridge and rest his soul, Commissioner Rich Regovich, to give you that tax relief, even when the school board said, no, we want to keep the money. I'm proud of my colleagues for having the courage to stand up to big government and say no. You know, they call me Commissioner No because I always vote no on taxes. Give me a chance and I'll vote for more relief. I'll quote Commissioner Beveridge, if I could have quintupled the homestead exemption and sent all government the bill, I would have done it. But we were only allowed to double it, and we did everything the state gave us the power to do. We ran the numbers, though, and ultimately the property tax increase that occurred in the last year was about $51 million across all taxing authorities in Lake County. And by doubling the homestead exemption and the owner occupancy credit, we were only able to give you about $14 million or less than a third of it back. So when you hear government cry, boo-hoo, the commissioners cut our budget, we gave you back less than a third of what they took from you. That's outrageous. They should be apologizing to you and giving you more of your money back. We did everything we could do. But it shows you how greedy government is when they're told we're going to get a 1.5% cut. That's what it translated to. We're going to get a 1.5% cut to our budget, less than an inflation adjustment, and you'd swear we shot them in the back. I mean, that's how greedy government is. I said it loud and proud on the news, if you're not prepared to cut your budget by 1.5%, you ain't budgeting. You don't even know what the word budget means. So don't cry me a river. Don't give me those crocodile tears. How are we going to balance the budget? You got a massive property tax windfall. Your budget went through the roof, and we gave back a nickel to the people. And we need to do more, but you know what? I'm proud that our commissioners did everything we could do. So that's number one. I'm proud, but it's not enough. Number two, to the school districts who think they're just going to keep flushing out new kinds of taxes, there's a reason why Wycliffe voted no on the 1% last time, and I think they're going to vote no again. It's because we are tapped out, we're taxed out, we're overburdened. You cannot simply tax people a different way. Let me say it loud and clear, Mr. Government. We the people are not saying tax us different ways. We're saying tax us less. And if you don't cut taxes big time right here, right now, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get over 600,000 signatures. We're going to get the property tax amendment on the ballot, and we're going to starve this beast. Because I agree with the people up here who have said the only way we're going to change things is if we force change. When government cries like a stuck pig, when you take away 1.5% of their budget, you know they aren't going to give back $20 billion. We're going to take it back.
Great job, Commissioner. When we talk about budgeting, I'd like to start with a zero-based budgeting. Go back, start with zero, and justify every expenditure. What they're doing now is what they call incremental. I'm here, and how much higher do I have to go? That's the wrong approach. The other, I get so tired of the deceptions by the state legislators. The latest one that we found is when they say that the current school funding formula is constitutional. The DeRoff case, I think everybody probably knows about that, declared that the extended use of property taxes for school funding was unconstitutional. They didn't say that the use of property tax was unconstitutional, but just the weight that they were using, there was just too much. So the state legislators came up with a new financing formula. And guess what? The state legislators now saying that this is now constitutional. And I think they need a little course in civics, because I always was told that the only branch of government that can determine constitutionality is the Supreme Court. It's never gone before the Supreme Court to determine whether or not the current funding formula is constitutional. So why wouldn't the teachers union, why don't they have a court case so we can determine once and for all? As Commissioner Plechnik said, Article 6, Section 2 of the code says that the schools are responsible for the funding. The property taxes, I started out this mission of trying to explain inside, outside millage, House Bill 920, 20 mil floor. Were glazing over when I started to get into the details. It is far too complex. And it is too subject to reverse engineering. Maybe Auditor Galloway, challenges me on this, but when I see school boards and taxing authorities giving their budget to the Budget Commission, and the Budget Commission doing nothing, certainly in Lake County, there were no checks and balances in the system. They've tried to change that recently with I can't remember the law number, 309, yes. It was 309 has given the Budget Commission the opportunity to take a look at these tax budgets submitted by the taxing authorities and determine whether or not there's excessive taxation. And Auditor Galloway gets a huge thank you for that, because he was instrumental in getting that. There's still a challenge, though, of what happens when you tell the school board you can't have, 1 year's worth of cash sitting on hand. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of legal challenges to whatever the Budget Commission is doing, but it is at least a start, and I thank Auditor Galloway for doing that.
Hey, I just want to say one thing that we're missing in this whole discussion. This state is in some serious trouble. And it's not just this state, this country is in trouble. And if we don't recognize that, I'm telling you right now, the disaster that we're going to leave for this next generation is unthinkable. Now, I'm going back to my mother's basic economic lessons. And she told me, she said, I have a way to fix this. I said, what's that? She said, if I cut your budget, I can't change your attitude, but I bet you I can modify your behavior. If we don't modify behaviors, you can kiss it goodbye. You don't just take one tax and move it to the next tax and move it over to that. If you are going to take a look at what you're bringing in and say, we have got to do something to save this state, that's a whole different discussion. That's what we call out-of-the-box thinking. I want to talk about one thing on education. I'm going to let this go. There's a very serious problem when there's the children population is going down and the costs continue to go up. Nobody wants to address that. Okay. The other thing is, we were fortunate enough to be able to homeschool our children. Now, not everyone can do that, but guess how we did it? It was people helping people. It wasn't the government doing that. Now, the other thing is, it does not take 12 years to educate a child. When the child can walk and talk, you can start learning. Now, you mentioned $24,000 a year. we didn't spend $10,000 over a 10-year period because it didn't take that long to educate them, and we got 2 engineers out the deal. And I'm saying there's something wrong. We don't want to talk about reforming education, but our whole model with this whole herd mentality, it doesn't work that way. We have individual strengths and weaknesses, and that has to happen. So now what we're seeing is a breakdown of the family. The government is assisting in it, and guess what we're doing? We're paying for our own demise. This is what you call insanity. This has to stop. So if we got to make hard decisions on what we got to do as far as setting priorities, you got to make it happen. Because you do it in your household. When I had to look for a new job, guess what? We had to cut back. I didn't have any more income coming in. I said, I got to go find another job. This is called life. But for somehow, when we get to the government, all of a sudden we just go brain dead. The same principles we use at home, they apply to the government. The government has to have reins on it just like we do in our family. You don't let your children run around like hell and do whatever they want to do. You reel them in. The government has to be reeled in. It's that simple. It is not that complicated.
All right. Hey, listen, I want to get a couple more questions in here.
All night long. But seriously,
let me get a couple questions in here real quick. Go ahead.
So maybe Mr. Massey can address this. It seems to me, and I've been probably one of the larger taxpayers based on my business, and I would love nothing more than property taxes to go away in the county, but it seems to me that we ended up voting ourselves into this position. Constantly I turn around and there's always another, there's the metro parks, there's the library, there's the school. It's over and it's over and it's over again. So we're going to get 600,000 signatures. That's great. We're going to eliminate property taxes. So tell me what's going to stop it from just starting over, and the school boards are going to start over and then vote another tax in because it's over and over and over again. And if they don't get their school board tax done, then they run and they stop extracurriculars and they shut the buses off. And then as soon as the parents got to drive the kids to school, they're standing down there and they're voting for another tax levy. So tell me why we just don't end up in this in another 2 years and it starts over.
So I'll kick that off by saying there's some very good reforms that are being discussed in Columbus that need to be given some serious looks. Having a higher threshold to pass levies in the future, whatever type of levy they may be. Discussion about a new 60% threshold makes sense because let's be real, government. Most of the levies passed last November. How do you square it? I said, Mr. Secretary, that's because they deliberately put these issues on ballots where they know the turnout will be low. They do not advertise the issues to the general public. They try to money on announcements that literally governments are allowed to send out a postcard saying there is a levy on the ballot for the schools or for the roads or whatever, and they can have very happy beautiful school. They can't say vote for it. They just say, here are these people standing by a school, and here's a school levy you should know about. So we are literally asking for people for their the only way it would be a fair fight if there was $100 million in the budget every year to spend against all levies. But short of that, having a higher threshold would make it more realistic so that a supermajority of the population would have to vote. I also frankly think it shouldn't be 60% of the people who vote. I think it should be 60% of eligible voters should have to approve. It should be a majority or a supermajority of the people, not just who happens to come out. If there's a snowstorm, if it's bad weather, if people don't know about the issue, you should be able to sneak a tax levy through. If there's going to be a new tax, a majority of the people who live there should vote yes, not just the majority of those who show up, because we know the strategies. School board members do go down to Columbus for conferences where they're told, here are the strategies for passing levies. And no one tells them to be honest about how much it'll cost everyone. No one tells them to let everyone know. They say, pick a low turnout election and hire a consultant who is going to just make you a guarantee that they're going to campaign for it until it passes. And then threaten people and tell them we're never going to stop. You may as well just give up now because we'll put it on the ballot the next time and the next time. I asked one Wycliffe school board member, your levy was defeated. If it gets defeated again, will you accept that the people have made a decision and it's time to cut the budget? And her response was, no, I'll just keep putting it on the ballot until it passes. That is politics.
Right.
Mark, it's the question that we've started out with tonight, right? And I can tell you right now in Columbus, they are already starting to position legislation to try to do the thing that sort of John has outlined, which is there's already now a bill for townships of a certain size, like Concord, to incorporate, right? And they've said, well, that's so that if the property tax elimination happens, so that Concord can incorporate, because if you eliminate property taxes today, every township will have zero money. Their only revenue stream is property taxes. So your fire, your police, your EMS, you're plowing your roads. Concord Township would have no revenue stream to do anything. So Columbus is saying, well, then we need to figure out a way for them to raise other revenue, right? To your point, you get back on the roller coaster. So they're saying, like, well, Concord would incorporate, and then what would they do? Well, what's the point of incorporation of a township from Columbus's perspective? Income tax. That's why the bill is there, to say, oh, now you can do an income tax. Because otherwise, Concord would have no revenue to run a fire truck. So that is already starting to take place. Those conversations are already happening in Columbus, and I think they're ones that we need to be watching and concerned about, which is that reform? Is that government reform? No. That's the shifting of potentially of $24 billion from property taxes to $24 billion of other revenue streams. In the end, we all still pay $24 billion through some means or another. And so I think that's the part of this that we have to be cognizant of and be watching is how they're already looking potentially to engineer the end game. Because they have all said, the governor, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President have all said, if property taxes are eliminated, we will not give any money from the state to pay for any of those local services. So you're on your own. And what does that mean for townships? All 1,308, I was going to say 7, 1,308 townships. That's 1,308 communities that have no revenue, instantly. And Columbus is saying, we won't give them any money. So I don't know what Andy and John, Concord's fiscal officers right here, handsome fellow in the tan suit. Hey, there's a plug.
Okay, let's go see what they have to say real quick, because I think we're getting a little late on time here. Go ahead. All right, and we'll keep it quick answer.
If Columbus forces our hand and we incorporate, our costs don't go down, our costs go up. Because there are things that we rely on the county for. We contract with the sheriff's department. As a city, I would have to establish a police department and probably 3 to 4 times the cost. I pick up all the county roads. So the county engineer, is the county going to shift some of their road budget to us since we're taking over those roads now? Commissioner Plechnik's not going to give us a dime, nor should he. So our costs go up, our paving costs go up, our service department. It actually increases the cost to operate your local government. That's just a point of reference. And I agree, the state legislature isn't going to replace one dime of local revenue that goes away if property taxes are abolished. They're going to give different taxing authorities to the local governments and to the schools to either you have the ability to have a increase in countywide sales tax that's distributed through a county distribution formula, or they're going to allow schools and communities to raise income taxes up to a certain level that's probably a little higher than it is now. But if you incorporate a township, costs go up exponentially because we also take over the ODOT roads. And that's more money for ODOT because they're not going to forfeit any of that money to us either.
All right, well said. So just switching gears a little bit, obviously a lot of talk about the school. So I guess curious on the panel's potential solutions for, I think right now the state of Ohio local governments have about $60 billion in outstanding long-term debt. And so a lot of that debt serviced through property tax revenue. So let's say property tax goes away, the next election cycle, assuming 600,000 signatures are there. If a domino effect starts where now some of this local debt starts to default, because there's not enough revenue to service that debt, where's the solution there? And have we considered the long-term effects of mass defaulting of government debt and what that does to the Ohio economy?
Again, that's the legislators to tackle that, not the average citizen.
It's not the legislator's problem. It's the local officials are on the hook for that bond.
Chris wants the mic, but before I give it to him, I can't resist. Of course, the governor and the speaker and the Senate president say, if you pass the property tax amendment, we won't pay a dime, see? We won't pay anything. I swear, we won't do it. You'll be screwed, see? Of course they're going to say that. That's politics. But you know what happens when property taxes are abolished and we have 1 year before they go away? Everybody looks at their state rep and senator and says, if I don't have police, roads, and fire next year, you're dead. There's not a state rep or senator who could get reelected in a million, billion, trillion, go-go-plex years if they actually had the gall to say, I'm going to be Nero and fiddle while Ohio burns. So I hear what they're saying, and they want people to repeat it. Oh, if we abolish property taxes, there won't be any money for local government. We won't pay a dime. The state will keep it all in Columbus. No, they won't. They'll say, I want to get reelected, and the only way I can get reelected is if I finally give back the state sales and state income tax to the people who pay it, where it was supposed to go back in the 1930s when we passed it in the first place. So I agree, you've correctly quoted our state leadership. They're lying.
So John, you raise a concern, and I've had a number of conversations with bond attorneys on this point. Most government in the state of Ohio has bonds that they have tied to property tax revenue, whether it's paying for a fire station. We have communities with bonded road revenue. And so those bonds, that money that those local agencies have borrowed, are tied and guaranteed by property tax revenue under the bonding contracts. And when I speak with bond attorneys, what I am told is that if Ohio were to eliminate property taxes completely, all of those bonds would automatically go into default. Even if somebody like Concord has a bond for paying on their fire station, their new fire station and stations. Good job, Andy, on getting money for the second one. Concord would technically be in default of those bonds.
Correct.
You would see that in 600 some odd jurisdictions in Ohio. It does create a conundrum. I don't know the legal issue in terms of how you resolve that. Could the state find some way to backfill that and to write some rider to guarantee all that municipal debt? Maybe.
Too big to fail.
There isn't really an answer at this point. And so, therefore, it wouldn't have an immediate impact on the state's credit rating. I mean, the state's credit rating, including yours, would crater. Your borrowing costs would skyrocket. And therefore, how do you borrow money?
This is the right thing to do, we need to sign.
Right. So
I think we're all on the same page, but it's like, well, how do we service this debt? How do we? Obviously, we're not going to live without fire.
I'm told that there will literally be thousands of lawsuits immediately filed based on it.
For the state's overhead.
You know, and that's what bond councils are telling me. And that's because of large jurisdictional investors like California Teachers Union or you name it, right? They own all these things, and they'll want guarantees that they're actually going to get paid on them. So I don't know what the answer would be from the state on that. Because, to John's point, it would fall to the state to figure out a way to make up those guarantees. But what that looks like, I don't know. I can tell you when I talk to legislators, they don't have a clue. They've said to me, well, we don't know how we would fix that. And so these are some of the, I think getting to the heart of your question, these are sort of the real world hurdles of figuring out how to, how that would look and how that would be engineered. These things are complicated, and it's a complicated web that we've weaved for 100 years.
And I think that Commissioner Plechnik obviously says it's in the Constitution that the state should and can be paying for the schools. Is that there for long-term debt for local municipalities? And if it's not, how do we get from point A to point B when that revenue goes away to going into default, cratering the credit rating for local municipalities and kind of a grander scale of Ohio economics? Is there a solution in place? And if there is, great.
And just to be clear, the Constitution doesn't say the state legislature should, as a moral matter, pay for public schools. It says they shall. Right. And the fact that they're not doing their constitutional duty is outrageous. But the reason they're not is they have a way out. They've been able to stick the bill to all of us. And the only way we're going to force them to do their job is by taking their money. We just ask politely, we've seen the result. If we sue and the Ohio Supreme Court tells them you have to pay, we've seen the result. They won't do it. And so the reason we've reached a point where we're not really worried if the state is forced to backfill with bond counsel, yeah, that would be a problem. It would be a challenge. But there are multiple ways it could be addressed. And at the end of the day, they're not going to go crazy. I mean, at the end of the day, these investors are going to want to be paid. They know that governments can pay. And something would be worked out. We don't know exactly what the solution looks like, but the state legislature would finally be forced to roll up their sleeves and do some real work, which I understand is the last thing they want to do, which is why they're only going to do it if they're forced to. I mean, I got to tell you, the way this started, Brian Massey's absolutely right. A lot of us independently reached out to the state legislature in response to your complaints. Over the last 3 years, bar none, the biggest number of complaints I've gotten, concerns I've gotten on any one issue is property taxes, people being taxed out of their homes. And my initial proposal was very similar to Brian's. In the Columbus Dispatch, I wrote an op-ed where I said if I was a state senator, I would pass a 100% property tax exemption for seniors. That was my first suggestion, my first push. And just like Brian, I got crickets. And you got to understand, folks, abolishing property taxes for just seniors would cost the state less than 3%. Less than 3% of their budget, less than the inflation adjustments they pay for their salaries. The fact that they wouldn't do that, we know what it would cost because they cost out a 50% exemption. Al Catrona, to his credit, Mahoning County State Senator, costed it out. It would be $1.5 billion for 50%. It'd be $3 billion for 100%. And with their all funds budget over $100 billion, once again, you don't have to be a math professor or a tax professor to know that's less than 3% of the state all funds budget. And so I always tell people, when your state senator or your state rep says they care about you, well, remember, they care about you less than 3% of their budget. If they're not going to make commonsensical, tiny reforms like that, our only option is to take the blunt instrument of a constitutional amendment and take all our money back.
There you go. All right.
Just one last thing. I wanted to answer that gentleman's question. He asked me directly. As we find, Leonard and I find, as we're talking to people about the property taxes, many people will say, well, I can pay my taxes. And we say, well, what about your neighbor? And the response is, well, that's their problem. You see, ladies and gentlemen, what we have become is an ungodly, uneducated, immoral society. Leonard and I operate on the biblical principles of love thy neighbor is a commandment, not a suggestion. And we're telling all of the people in the state of Ohio, we are going to stand up against the tyranny of the state legislators. They should not think that we're going to go away. And we're getting threats. I'll just tell everybody. I told this gentleman I was told that, Brian, you've got to be careful. You're dealing with $20 to $25 billion. A lot of people are making a lot of money. Don't process the petitions in your home, in your basement. Somebody will firebomb your house. And Brian, you better start carrying your weapon, because you're going to have a lot of angry people coming after you. What kind of sick society do we have, ladies and gentlemen, that we cannot redress our grievances with our government without fear that someone is going to kill us? Unfortunately, many of our citizens are not engaged. Many of them, the only worry they have is that the Browns are down by 10 at halftime. So unfortunately, many people do not react until they hit bottom. And sometimes when they hit bottom, it's too late. We're trying to shine light into the darkness. And we appreciate everyone coming tonight. We really do. Thank you so much.
Let's give them a nice round of applause for everybody. I think we're going to wrap it up on that note, okay? It's 8 o'clock. We got to get out of here. But thank you all for coming. Thank you again very, very much. And sign the petition.
Mr. Pleasant. Hey guys, I'm Tom Cull. I'm actually one of the evil board